Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the automation that is given to us in XNAT 1.8 using the event service. And this is going to be a lot more sophisticated than the simple events and command launchers that we had available to us in XNAT 1.7. So first I'm going to log in as an admin, and I will go to this new item in the menu here, Administer Event Service. And we can see here now we have an event subscription concept. The idea here is that when an event happens, we can build a little event handler and subscribe it to that event. And so this is a copy of the command automation that we created for that nifty proc project in part 1 of our demo. It's a very simple thing. You run dicom to nifty on scan archive. It takes a look at the scan created event. You can see we have a lot more events available to us now than in our previous menu. And it's also smart enough to show us only the actions that are enabled in that project that are linked to this event context. So in other words, we're talking about creating a scan. Let's only take a look at actions that are relevant to creating a scan and that are enabled in that project. And we can also set attributes on our container execution. So we can say, we can put in our flags for other options if we need to. And this is something that I'll get into in just a moment. We have an opportunity to create a filter using JSON path notation that will determine whether or not this event subscription or this event handler runs. And then we also have a toggle here. So I'm the admin of this XNAT. We can set up this automation so that when it runs, in the logs, it appears as though I've run the container. Or we can toggle it so that the person uploading the scan and triggering the event, that they show up as the person in the logs who has launched the container. So as you can see, a lot more options, a lot more sophistication, but let's get to the next part of our demo. Let's see what happens if we try to run this on our TCI data, which, if you remember, was a lot more complex than the nifty proc data was, and gave us some fits when we tried to run a standard dicom to nifty conversion on every single scan. Okay, so what I've done is I've created a duplicate of the run dicom to nifty event handler, and I've copied it for the COVID-19 AR project. And I have re-uploaded one of my CT sessions, just using standard settings, no funky business. And as you would expect, we have a series of processing failures and a series of successes. And if you remember, we ran into 2 different types of failures, where one was a failure in scan dicoms. Dicom to nifty container couldn't launch because it couldn't find a resource named dicom. These were the scans that were secondary captures, like this one here. And then the other type of failure was the trickier one, where we had this issue of slices not being stacked and needing to run a different a merge option in the dicom to nifty command itself. And this is a property of the dicom scans that XNAT is more or less blind to. This is something that you, as the study coordinator or the image coordinator, would be aware of in your protocol, but it goes beyond what the XNAT UI can tell. And so, as I said in the TCIA demo video, when we were running containers, it would be nice if if XNAT had the ability to sniff out those scans, but it doesn't. But what we can do, we can basically predict that kind of behavior based on scan type. If we think, this 3mm scan, these merge scans, these thin scans, These are examples of scan types that are going to cause us problems because they have DICOM data of this type in it. We can set our filter that way. And I happen to have collated a list of scans, scan types that behaves in this way and needs this special treatment. And I'll show you how we can accommodate that. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new event subscription. And we'll call it run DICOM to Nifty merged on TCIA, on our scan created event. Okay. And when we want to merge, we know we need to add this extra command flag -m, yes. And here's where things get fun. We can use this JSON path payload filter to specify what scan type we should use. But how do we know how to fill in that filter? It depends on what the event service can see. And that's where it can help to have gone through a little trial and error. So we can take a look at one of these failed commands here and dive deep into the command inputs and say, what exactly was it that was given to the container service by the event service? What does it know about the scan? And we get this from this raw input right here. And this is a big pile of JSON. I'm going to copy this and I'm going to drag it over into this JSON pretty printer. And you can see there's a lot here. Even at the file level, but we get scans, we get type. The type of this thing is a scan. We get a label, you get an XSI type, resources, an ID, an integer ID. But what we're really concerned with is this scan type down here. That's the label, and that's the value that we want to have our filter on. And that filter is going to look a little something like this. So these scans in this array are going to run DICOM to Nifty with merge on. What about the other scans? What we want to do now is configure our normal operation, our default operation of DICOM to Nifty, so that it excludes those scans and it also excludes the scans that don't have a DICOM labeled resource. And so we'll set up a new payload filter for that. And we'll label that DICOM to Nifty TCIA default, and let's rename the other one TCIA merged. So now we have two different event handlers, and they are set up to run on two different sets of scans within the uploads we're going to do for this project. And they're going to run our DICOM to Nifty process in two different ways. Let's actually start uploading data and see what happens. First, I need to delete this session because what we're going to do is go back to our uploader and we're going to re-upload it and try to trigger all these containers to run properly. And that'll be our canary in the coal mine, so to speak. So select our project, get our file, and let's launch this thing and see what happens. All right, our session came through, processing is active, and whoa, die. Okay, this looks terrible, but actually what this is, we're getting text here directly in our status column. We're getting text directly from the container service, and die is what Docker says when a container is being completed and it is ready to wrap up and send data back. And so now we see finalizing, now we see complete. But yeah, that was alarming for a minute there. But let's reload one more time, and they all ran successfully. And that is an example of what you can do with containers and events. Pretty exciting stuff.